So welcome everybody. This is a free presentation from ACC, or sponsored by Ordr, provided by ACCE on the Mayo Clinic efforts to secure connected medical devices and HIoT. The presentation here today was with Keith Whitby and Pandian. And quick introduction is, my mouse is working here. Keith Whitby has worked at Mayo Clinic for over 22 years. Been many different positions all around the hospital. Is currently section head of healthcare technology management, cybersecurity, and operations. During his time at Mayo, Keith has had extensive experience collaborating with multidisciplinary teams, demonstrated a commitment to customer service, strong leadership skills, and experience in process analysis, project management, and technical support. He's been exposed to the depth and breadth of medical equipment in a large healthcare organization. This includes service support and organizational cybersecurity on the wide range of medical equipment and HIoT. I can tell you he's devoted to healthcare technology management and cybersecurity. From Ordr, Pandian will be presenting. He's the Chief Product Officer at Ordr, which is an agentless device security startup company that he co-founded. Currently, he is the Chief Development Officer, he was the Chief Development Officer at Aruba, responsible for the engineering and product management functions. Aruba is an enterprise mobile wireless company which got acquired by HP for about $3 billion in March 2015. He comes to Ordr with 20 years of experience in engineering and product management from Cisco, as long as a long career at Cisco Wireless before departing for Aruba. Before that, he was also the Vice President of Engineering for low-end switching, a very successful product line that has also reached several $1 billion annual run rate. Pandian graduated with a master's degree in electrical engineering from IIT and holds several patents to his credit in various networking technologies. Without further ado, I'm going to hand the controls over to Keith, and he will give you a quick overview.
Thank you so much, Eric, and I just I want to start out by first thanking the ACCE for the gracious invitation to present this morning. I also want to thank Pandian for partnering with me on this presentation. I think to start off with, we're going to talk a little bit about Mayo Clinic, the Mayo Med Device Cybersecurity Program, history behind it, current state, some of the key accomplishments or achievements that we've been able to achieve over the past few years. We'll also be speaking about how an automated asset inventory and security tool, in Mayo's case, Ordr, but I know a lot of other organizations have other tools they're capitalizing on, but how these types of tools can really lace into cybersecurity programs like ours at Mayo Clinic, definitely very important. And then later on in the presentation, Pandian is going to be talking more specifically about some of the technical details or technical benefits end-to-end through the lifecycle management of a piece of medical equipment from the security perspective, how Ordr can plug in and be of benefit to your organization. So, with that, I'm just going to start out talking a little bit about Mayo Clinic at a glance. For those of you that aren't familiar with Mayo, a bit of a delay here. There we go. Just a high-level Mayo priorities, pretty standard mission. The primary value is the needs of the patient come first. But as you can see, around patient safety, we also have to be accountable for accreditation within HTM. We need to be responsible for the security of the equipment that we're supporting, and we also need to take into account business continuity, which that's a huge component at Mayo Clinic, and I would assume at other organizations. Again, to kind of get into the depth and breadth of Mayo, provide some visualization, how broad our organization is geographically. Our hub is in Rochester. We have what we call the Mayo Clinic Health Systems, which is the area that's inside of the dotted lines there, and then significant sites in Arizona and Jacksonville, Florida. Our HTM organizational structure, this is important. This is interesting information for a lot of folks in clinical engineering, biomedical engineering. have about 280 staff right now. We're rapidly growing within the organization, about 220 biomed technicians, clinical engineers, 20 managers, and 40 support staff. 26 shops, 66 communities spanning 5 states geographically. Our med device fleet is over 130,000 devices. We have tens of thousands more devices that are falling into that facilities operations or HIoT category that aren't really accounted for on this slide. But medical equipment, medical devices, we have over $2 billion current state in value for our medical device fleet. Our in-house program is heavily focused on supporting service and support of equipment in-house, really keyed by contract reduction elimination and cost avoidance. That's really the underlying justification for our program, the size of our program. Eliminate vendor contracts to the extent possible, bring service and support of our medical equipment in-house to the extent possible. The image below just is a breakdown of the upper level of our HTM division. We're really broken down heavily by modalities. So we have imaging modality, lab and research modality, a biomed modality, and then another section responsible for Arizona and Florida. A whole lot of communication and collaboration between each of these different facets in our HTM group. But you can see my group is actually in the red circle here, information security and business operations. So not only am I responsible for the cybersecurity program in HTM, but also other systems-related groups that reside within HTM, Philips monitoring, asset disposition, project coordination, support specialists, a number of different things, building out a connected care support program, telemedicine support program, and so on. I think it's really important to understand some of the historical gaps and challenges related to med device security to really get this going. Many of you are familiar with our Office of Information Security, and I'll talk a little ways down the road how we interlace with IT and with our Office of Information Security. Over the years, our Information Security Group has really built an industry-leading intake and assessment process. Evaluate equipment as it's coming in, understand the security risks related to that equipment, build out a plan of mitigating controls or compensating controls that need to be applied to that equipment, and then what? That's my question. So they really have an excellent security knowledge and have done some awesome things at Mayo over the last few years. However, there's been this operational gap. How do we actually apply what's being recommended to equipment? How do we operationalize it? The assessments that have happened up to this point have been very specific to a singular device coming in the door. Again, defining those mitigating controls that need to be applied. Many of those controls are very vendor dependent. Many can never happen on equipment without the expertise of HTM to kind of plug in and help define what can and can't happen on a vended piece of equipment. The approach was very asset by asset and had a limited impact on overall fleet risk. With tens of thousands of devices, sure, securing a single device will have some impact on the overall fleet risk, but there's a much better way to look at it from our perspective. Really, after these assessments are completed, who is actually applying the compensating controls? Who is operationalizing vulnerability management within the organization? That's a huge gap that exists within that did exist within Mayo, did exist within a whole lot of other organizations as of a couple of years ago, and likely still exists in many organizations. And there's really, when we started the program, there's really a lack of an operational framework or defined processes, standardized processes across our entire organization. And we felt that was a pretty significant gap that needed to be filled as well. Make sure that whatever approach is identified and agreed upon, that approach is being applied the same way across the whole organization. We all know that medical equipment, medical devices, IoT is unique. It's different than standard IT endpoints. We are obligated to follow regulatory guidelines where workstations sitting in physician offices are not. These are extremely complex systems. It's very manual and resource intensive to handle vulnerability management, to handle patching of equipment. Again, where does that work reside? Who is responsible for doing that work? Access to devices is a challenge when organizations are using their equipment extensively. There's a significant lack of IT-like deployment options. We cannot install standard agents on many pieces of medical equipment. It requires specialized skills to be dealing with this medical equipment, medical devices, specialized skills and training, where we send technicians to very specific training based on the modality and model that they're providing coverage for. Vendor urgency is a huge issue that we deal with medical equipment on the regular asset management side of the business, but also in the security world. A lot of legacy equipment that we're responsible for has never been assessed, resides in within our fleet, unsupported operating systems, unupdated equipment, service keys required. The challenges go on and on. Another significant barrier we found is the geographical implications of Mayo Clinic as an organization. Obviously, 5 states, 26 shops, 300 buildings, 50,000 plus network connected medical devices, hundreds of vendors, thousands of models. When we started the program, there were serious inventory discrepancies, meaning who's responsible for capturing data, these network attributes, or component level attributes for equipment. Who's responsible for verifying that information? Who's responsible for maintaining that information? Who's tracking, documenting, and applying controls, patches, et cetera? There were significant mismatches in data between what we have in our CMMS and what exists in the organizational CMDB and what's being identified by Cisco ICE. The mismatched data piece, huge opportunity for Ordr to come in and help us really clean that up. Are all network connected medical devices inventoried? That's the bottom line. The first step of security, obviously, we all know is identification, inventory. So briefly, the cybersecurity team within HTM, really we belong within IT. That's a recent move, happened in January of the year. We're an organization within IT. Our cybersecurity team is a team and a program that fits within HTM at Mayo. There's a whole lot of communication, collaboration that happens with our Office of Information Security, who also resides within IT. And we collaborate on a daily basis with our clinical information security group within IT. The way you can look at our HTM cybersecurity team versus the clinical information security team is the fact that our HTM team is very operational and our information security group is very consultative. We have experience on the equipment. We're responsible for we're responsible for the lifecycle management of that equipment, including security. We know the standards for compliance and regulatory requirements. We have the vendor relationships. We have the specialized tools. And overall, we just have better acceptance from the technicians rather than another group within IT mandating or dictating what needs to happen on the equipment that we're supporting. The HTM role in cybersecurity, really, again, the crux of the matter is our cybersecurity team in HTM is the operational arm of security as it relates to medical equipment. Our goal has been to build out a very structured program with a standardized approach, capitalizing on economies of scale, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as we talk about how our staff is dispersed. We've done such a good job that we've been asked also to take on the facilities operations equipment within the organization and been provided resources to help accommodate for that type of equipment within the organization as well, and some of the HIoT devices that exist within Mayo. Really, our goal is to ensure that equipment is functional and optimized in order to meet patient safety, business continuity, regulatory, and cybersecurity needs. We have accountability through the entire device, entire technology life cycle of the equipment that we're responsible for. That means having visibility to what we have and what's connected on our network, to be actively monitoring that equipment, and then to be taking action when needed through the entire life cycle of the devices that we're responsible for. As we've built out our program, we didn't stick our finger in the air to test the wind to figure out how we needed to construct this. Really, we started by really looking at what is the mission of our program, what are the goals of our program, what are the objectives of our program, and this slide really drills down to the granularity of what are the activities that we're responsible for as an HTM cyber team. All of this is driven by NIST and ACCE med device cybersecurity guideline standards, the NIST CSF 800-53, TIR 57. Everything that we're doing, we've mapped and tied to specific framework requirements to make sure that there's some guiding direction behind everything that we're trying to accomplish. Sometimes there's a one-to-one mapping of our activities to a NIST CSF framework or ACCE guideline, and other times it's a many-to-one mapping. This has also helped us identify lines of responsibility between information security and between the HTM cybersecurity team. This is just a quick breakdown of what the structure of our team looks like. Obviously, I'm the section head, and I'm ultimately responsible for the program. I have a strong manager that oversees this on a day-to-day basis. Our core team consists of a principal engineer, senior engineer, standard engineer, and then the information security manager and myself. And then underneath that, we've kind of broken down to operational support team versus the field engineering team. We have people that are more office-bound on a day-to-day basis, working on some of the what we'll call SPAD intake that I'll describe in a minute, and doing more of the high-level analysis. And then we have another group of individuals that are embedded within our local shops every day, all day, to actually be the boots-on-the-ground staff to do the work and touch the equipment. The core team, again, really that was the first layer of this, brought them in, and a very cross-pollinated team. I have some experience from internal audit. I have some experience from the Federal Reserve. One of our engineers has 35 years of experience in HTM and clinical engineering. And one of our engineers actually came over from IT and has a really good connection to our colleagues, more so on the traditional IT side of the world. And the first step was to really build out that NIST and ACCE-based framework. We've built out standardized processes and procedures to accomplish the work that I'm describing. They're assisting with a whole lot of projects that we have in flight, from our NAC project, segmentation efforts, building out tools that we can capitalize on within our security team. Just really strong work. They're a high-end resource for our associate engineering team, our field engineering team that we have within HTM, and also a resource for our technicians that exist within HTM. We've built out and guided a strong vulnerability management program, meaning however we're made aware of a vulnerability, we have a very structured process for walking through the remediation of that vulnerability, organizationally wide in a very standardized way. We've constructed and maintained fleet-level comprehensive risk scoring that's reported to several of our governance groups, engaged with industry groups like ACCE, FDA, SBOM, NTIA, the NTIA SBOM effort, HSCC, CISA efforts, and we've also been heavily involved in operationalizing order within our organization, with the goal of really automating as many of these security workflows as we can in more of an HTM-flavored language, meaning convert things from IT speak over to HTM speak and standardized work orders that are actually coming from our CMMS versus more of the traditional IT work order workflow systems like ServiceNow. The associate engineering team, this is the embedded team that we have within HTM. They're embedded within each local shop. They are the security subject matter expert for our biomedical technicians. They are the security point of contact with our vendors. They are responsible for creating procedures to apply compensating controls. They are responsible for building procedures to apply vulnerability management, remediation, patch management, et cetera. They are the ones that are actually applying the controls to medical equipment and working with our technicians to apply controls to medical equipment where possible. They are also our network connectivity subject matter experts. As our network has become more and more complex with access control, segmentation, et cetera, it's very difficult to get a piece of equipment on the network. And these folks have all the same tools that our NOC has, our Network Operations Center has, enabling us to have a one-stop shop for technicians to help get a piece of equipment on the network and troubleshoot through network connectivity issues. They're also responsible for doing localized training and education as it relates to security for our HTM shops across the organization. And then they are our local incident response subject matter experts. We also have a team within HTM, and this is relatively new over the last year, to help make our purchasing process more efficient. Our purchasing process or assessment process is called SPAD, Security, Privacy, Architecture, Data. It's the security assessment, as it's known in most other organizations. We're actually plugged in on the front end now where we're doing an initial intake triage of all equipment coming in and really defining, is this new to the organization or do we have a whole lot of these already connected to our network? Really evaluating hardware and software, med device as a software package, triaging, categorizing this equipment, making sure that we're not redundantly assessing equipment that we've already assessed. We're routing through the appropriate level of intake assessment, so routing to the appropriate review groups, whether it's our enterprise architecture group, our security teams, et cetera. And then also providing a white glove or a guided assessment preparation, making sure that there's a technical person in this process, making sure that we're compiling all of the deliverables from both the proponent and the vendor and being that facilitator to help the purchase proponent understand the technical details that we need as part of that assessment process. We collaborate heavily with information security and the proponent to really determine what the mitigating controls need to look like on the equipment. And then we're constructing what we call a security lifecycle profile, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it's a model-specific roadmap or template that can be applied not only on the device coming in the door at the moment, but on the rest of the fleet of like devices. Execution, really, in order to build this team, we've leveraged a whole bunch of things, leveraged known security incidents, leveraged vulnerabilities that have occurred over the past few years to really highlight and illustrate the fact that there's a significant gap within the organization, operationally speaking, allowing us to actually fix the problems. We've also leveraged regulatory compliance and other business opportunity issues, heavily leveraged internal audit observations to justify the need for this operational team to actually apply security to devices. And we've also leveraged some governance groups which exist within Mayo, heavily our security committee, and then we also have a governance group called the Med Device Oversight Subcommittee that's specifically responsible for medical equipment and the security of medical equipment within the whole organization. Again, looking at this from the end-to-end life cycle, from pre-purchase through decommissioning, heavily involved with the risk assessment processes, leveraging Mayo's 6 baseline security controls or criteria. There's a slide here that illustrates that, but I'm not going to delve too much into it. Work heavily with the vendors to address what the device weaknesses are. We deploy, track, and apply mitigations capitalizing on the lifecycle profile. We address ongoing security issues with the vulnerability management program or process that we've built out. Again, regardless of how we're being made aware of a vulnerability, either via a tool like Ordr, disclosure notifications from vendors, notifications from ISOs or ISAC groups that we participate in. The intake could come from anywhere. We handle it in a very standardized way. Sanitizing the device after use at equipment decommissioning or disposal. This is the Mayo 6 baseline requirements. Supported operating system. Operating system is receiving patches, has antivirus applied, receives third-party software patches, no default hard-coded password, complies with Mayo work account standards, all of which are key, and this is what equipment is being measured against as it's coming in the door. So this is just a snapshot of a Word document example, anyhow, of what a security lifecycle profile looks like. Again, this is the roadmap, or what we would consider the security-specific service manual that our technicians or our associate engineers are leveraging when equipment comes in. It's the what needs to be done on a device through its entire life cycle and who's going to be responsible for it. This reduces variation throughout the organization and really tries to help us standardize and centralize the process for, or the how-to, or what needs to happen as it relates to medical equipment. And then work orders are then tied back to remediation tasks on the equipment. So a specific work order per profile that needs to be applied. Again, all tracked within our CMMS system. And this also supports our risk model and quantification within the organization. Again, you can look at this as a security-specific service manual for the boots-on-the-ground staff that actually need to do something on equipment. The other thing that we've been able to accomplish with our SPAD work is to really adopt a fleet approach versus an asset-by-asset approach to security remediation. So the old process is take a look at a singular device, build out the controls that need to be applied on that device, track in our risk management system against those controls. With our profile, we've created a scenario that's far more efficient with far more risk reduction to the organization, because we can say, let's capitalize on the opportunity to look at the device. Let's figure out what controls, compensating controls, onboarding steps, decommissioning process, et cetera, more so at the model level. Let's apply that profile across the entire fleet, really gaining us much better risk reduction across the entire organization. The VM program, a little bit more specifically, goal being, hey, we need to enhance our inventory with more specific attributes so that we can better track against particularly some of the vulnerabilities and some of the challenges that have come about more recently. Tracking the operating system, third-party software, firmware, protocols, et cetera, as it relates to assets. And we've, again, heavily been involved in the NTIA SBOM work. We've been asking vendors for our own SBOM, so to speak, that's being plugged into our CMMS. And we've been leveraging Ordr heavily to really clean up the gaps in our inventory system, almost to the point where, of late, we've found the data that we're getting from Ordr is in many cases more accurate than the data that's been fat-fingered into our CMMS system. So we've become more reliant on Ordr than we have been on the data that's being entered in by technicians or others as assets are being created or modified. We're tracking software vulnerabilities from a number of different sources, both internal and external. Our Security Operations Center, again, vulnerability notifications or disclosures, a number of different inputs into this program, all of which are accounted for. We've prioritized remediation in the context of impacted assets and patient impact, exploitability, exposure, et cetera. So we really know the urgency with which we need to address this issue on a device-by-device level within the practice. We've done a lot of work towards standardizing patching procedures by model type, creating work orders for tracking completion on devices. We monitor and track the status of all remediation that's being done so that we can go down to the asset level and report back that a vulnerability like Bluekeep or Deja Blue or Ripple 20 has been addressed on a piece of equipment, all of which is really following the FDA post-market guidance for patching. Some of the tools that we leverage, Nuvolo is key. We're in the process of deploying Nuvolo within the organization, a very robust enterprise asset management solution. It really helps us line up with the ServiceNow platform that's being used in the IT side of the world. We're partnering with them currently to really build out and enhance the cybersecurity module that exists within that tool to better support our needs within Mayo Clinic, as well as potentially be leveraged by other organizations as well. The Nuvolo tool will, in the future, be able to support vulnerability management that's happening in a little bit more manual fashion today with TMS. We will be able to build our security lifecycle profiles and security lifecycle profile procedures for mitigation efforts into Nuvolo, and most importantly, Nuvolo will integrate with our CMDB. We track a lot more granular information on the medical equipment and facilities asset side than is being tracked in the CMDB today. We want to be able to leverage both worlds and send relevant data to the CMDB while still being able to track, the granular data as it relates to medical equipment within our CMMS system. Another key tool, again, is Ordr. Ordr improves the quality of data in our asset inventory. We've found that time and time again since implementation. Ordr's been a fantastic vendor to work with, and we've come large strides over the last 2 years in cleaning up our inventory. It has the capability to detect network medical devices, which is huge, in a very passive way, meaning no agent involved. That's a major barrier for us in the med device world and the IoT world, including our legacy fleet. It's helping us classify and categorize equipment, and we've done a tremendous amount of work with Ordr over the last couple of years. One thing that comes to mind is our connected care deployment. Is it an HP tablet or is it a connected care telemedicine device? How do we work with Ordr to identify that particular tablet is a telemedicine device, categorize it appropriately, and monitor it appropriately. Ordr has also provided excellent insight into connected device actions, really drilling down to the flow level, the port protocol service level. What is normal behavior, what is anomalous behavior, and we've heavily leveraged that up to this point. Ordr has been heavily integrated with some of our device security operations, really pinning down, from our fleet of tens of thousands of devices, which devices are truly impacted by a Ripple 20 or which devices are truly impacted by a Bluekey. We've worked with Ordr to integrate into other enterprise security tools like Cisco ICE. How do we leverage all of these tools within our organization? And then most recently, we have some very heavy microsegmentation efforts happening within our organization, leveraging Ordr analysis, leveraging Ordr policy creation, along with our Cisco ICE infrastructure, both from the DACL perspective, the ACL perspective at the switch, the native ACL from Ordr, and also in the TrustSec environment, security group tag ACL application to really get down to the micro-segmentation level with Ordr within the organization. Most recently, to really apply a robust layer of security around our Windows 7 equipment. Progress to date, our program is adding significant security value for the organization. We've improved the intake and the purchase process for the organization, rapidly increasing turnaround time from when a proponent understands they want to purchase a piece of equipment to when they get the endorsement from our assessment groups. We've established a fleet risk score. We've established a mechanism for tracking and applying mitigation. We've operationalized the vulnerability management program. We've launched the med device patch installation automation tool for our associate engineers or technicians to apply patches across our entire fleet. We've heavily participated in many industry work groups, again, Archimedes, HISEC, the NTIA SBOM efforts, FDA, AMI, et cetera. And we've heavily leveraged Ordr up to this point and really look forward to capitalizing on Ordr even more for asset identification, reconciliation, security analysis, vulnerability management, and micro-segmentation. So in a nutshell, these circles really illustrate all of the different areas that our cybersecurity program is participating in and building upon to reduce risk to the organization, operationalize security for Mayo Clinic. And I think that hopefully based on what I've talked about over the last few minutes, you can see how an Ordr or a tool like Ordr heavily impacts each of these circles or most of these circles that are part of our program. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Pandian and let him roll through some of the specifics as it relates to order. Thank you very much, and look forward to hearing some questions.
Thank you, Keith. Can you hear me? Thank you very much, Keith. Can you hear me well? Thank you.
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. First, I would like to start by thanking our colleagues in ACCE. I really appreciate the opportunity for me and the Ordr team to participate in the webinar, and it's also a pleasure and a privilege to share the podium with our colleague from Mayo, Keith Whitby. It has been a fun ride. We also want to thank Mayo for giving us the opportunity to work with them for the last few years in terms of going through the program with them, and the learnings are immense, and we have come a long way with their partnership as far as our product is concerned. So just to give you a brief overview about Ordr, Ordr is founded about 5 years back with some Cisco and Aruba networks veterans with deep security networking knowledge base. We have raised a significant amount of capital in the last round. One thing to note is, besides our large investors, world-renowned investors like Wing Ventures, Battery Ventures, 1011, and Unusual, we also got investments from Mayo Clinic. I think we have to thank them big time for the confidence they have exhibited on us. And also a large healthcare organization that's predominantly in the West Coast, Kaiser, also invested in Ordr. And Ordr is actually deployed in very many large networks across many verticals. And I'll tell you a little bit about our story as we keep going. So I just want to start with a simple notion called one network and one team. Ordr's thesis and the mission and the vision came from this fundamental understanding that there is one single fabric in which every single device connects. So if you understand this fabric, if you understand what's going on that network, every packet, every flow, every application, every user, then we could provide enormous amount of intelligence as well as protection for security. That's the fundamental thesis in which our company was formed. And our vision is to bring a holistic approach. What I mean by holistic approach is, if you kind of look at the network today, I just showed some different varieties of devices that we are finding. It is not just medical devices of hospital pumps and CT scans, X-ray machines, blood pumps, EKGs, ECGs. We are also finding HVAC systems, solar heater systems. We are also finding Alexas coming in, laptops, desktops, iPads used in clinical care. We are finding, surveillance cameras. We are finding, consumer devices, pharmacies, retail. So the reason why we took an holistic approach is because we have a shared network, shared fabric, shared faith, shared vision, and shared goal. We really believe in this. And by bringing a holistic perspective about the whole campus, about everything that is connected into it, we can bring knowledge base to every single department. How many departments are operating in a single network? There is an IT network department, there is a biomed department, there is a compliance and privacy and risk, there is operations. Every department's concern is different. And our mission is, can we produce a platform that unifies all these concerns together, all the knowledge base together as a single set of truth, so we can offer this intelligence to all the places, all the players, to satisfy their needs and wants. So we really believe in this holistic approach, not a siloed approach. We strongly believe the knowledge that we gained by doing security programs for laptop is not good enough, because CT scans are not laptops. So we really have to meld the knowledge we got over the years into the knowledge that the clinical engineers bring to the table, so that we can provide a holistic program. So let me get into a concept called 360-degree enforcement. I think Keith covered quite a bit about the various activities that we are doing inside a campus. I just wanted to take a very simple example and illustrate it with 3 devices, the good, bad, and the ugly, the MRI machine, workstation, and the compromised laptop. The reason I want to take this as a simple example is because this can highlight what we can do at scale with hundreds and thousands of devices. And as Keith says, we are extremely good in understanding what these devices are, what their risk is, what is the impact of their risk to the patient safety. Because when we talk about risk, cyber risk is very different than clinical risk. A device with the FDA rating 1 and 2 is very different. A device with the criticality of a stroke protocol that is running an emergency center is very different. So we have to bring this common knowledge to each and every department and customize it and give them the dashboard and the workflow that each department requires. And that's what we are trying to do for the last several years. So I just wanted to give you some example. On the left, we know that this is a Philips Engineer machine running an operating system with a serial number. This is what the critical engineers are so concerned. And when there is a call coming in from a nurse, they want to go to the dashboard and immediately figure out what this machine is, exact details. On the middle, it is the operational concern. When was the last service contract executed? Who is the owner? What is the control number? We integrate with CMDB so that we can bring that information in one dashboard to give it to all the players on the tool. On the right side, it is the IT that talks in terms of IP, MAC address, which port, which Ethernet link it is connected to. And for operations, is it really up? Is it really down? How many scans it has done? How many studies it has done? How many clinics we have and how many X-rays we have in each of the clinic? What is the calendar? How are they working? How is it utilized effectively? So different organizations, different constituents, different operators, they all want different information, but they want it to be correlated. And that's where we are really happy to provide a unified platform that creates a common source of truth so that we can fulfill the vision of, whatever information you need, we can provide it at your fingertips in seconds. So now I'm going to get into a little bit more security. Okay, when we talk about security, it's not just a standard WannaCry and phishing attack that we talk in security world, but it's about FDA recalls. It's about manufacturer, how many third-party software is running. Is this really patched in? Is it not really patched in? Obviously, you cannot patch some things. You cannot scan certain things. So the nomenclature varies when it comes to cybersecurity or the clinical security, and we are trying to cater to that kind of clinical security for completely dedicated to biomed department and do this. So the next thing that I'm talking about is it is not about 400,000 devices or 200 buildings connecting all of them. We are collecting gigabits of traffic of millions of flows. The good news is, so far with static attributes, we use enormous amount of protocol decoding, deep packet inspection, all the techniques that we can employ. But when it comes to really flow analytics, we have to go back to our colleagues in Google, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Those guys know how to do this, analyzing millions and millions of transactions. How do you build a graph database in terms of analyzing it? How do you take every bit that moves into the network and say who talks to who, where, when, why? You need to have all of that. And you also have to have advanced algorithms like anomaly detection, outlier detection, correlation, recommendation engine, so that you can clearly say what is good, what is bad, what is ugly, what is the behavior, is this behavior same as every other behavior that we have seen? If you see some problems, how many packets from this destination, how many flows, suddenly I will get a request, hey, give me all the guys who are doing SMB1, how much data they have transferred, how many FTP sessions are going on from ICD scan, how many RDP sessions coming in through the firewall. We have to have all the data on our fingertips to provide. And this is where I think we believe we built a very robust, very scalable, extremely sophisticated platform to offer this at scale. And we have used some really remarkable technologies from machine learning and AI. Honestly, we didn't invent any of this. This is all coming from the open source social networking companies, and we take advantage of plenty of them to put to use for biomed and clinical engineering use. So now I'm going to some examples. Okay, what happens? You have done all the fact finding, all the information is right, but you never can say, yeah, healthcare worker takes a laptop home, goes into a phishing site, downloads a malware, connects next day into the corporate campus, it starts spewing malware. Doesn't matter what malware, you have to find it in seconds. You have no time. You have no time. The last thing we want to stand up and say is, my ambulances are, directed to the neighborhood clinical facilities. We are going to be down for a few hours so that we can recover. You don't have a choice, especially COVID-19 and all the emergency it has created. So how do we do that, right? We have, injected technologies like intrusion detection. To do that, we went to our colleagues in Cisco, partnered with them, partnered with a lot of leading research organizations, and we got signatures, we got reputations. We have to immediately find and then go and tell, hey, this is coming through this access point, connected to this wiring closet controller, and we have to go apply a policy saying, this laptop, this MAC address should not enter the network immediately. And how do you propagate this policy across 240 buildings? That's the scale that Ordr brings to the table. Immediately finding problems and giving a solution in an automated fashion. And then there is obviously manual approvals that we have built in so that it doesn't take action right now on its own, but it sends alerts and triggers. And the next one, it's even more simpler. Okay, everything is fine. Somebody logs into a machine, it happens to be an old Windows. He connects a USB stick into it. He starts browsing the internet. No, you have to know your policy. And why would a CT scan going to random website? So you have to have a policy and tell your firewall, okay, we have 22 CT scans in this building. These are the websites they go. If it is GE, maybe they will go to GE.com. That's fine. They will go to certain servers, PAC servers in the data center. So how do we understand that different types of devices? Is it an MRI? Is it an oscilloscope pump? Is it a pulsation monitor? Is it capsule neuron? Is it EKG, ECG? How do we group them? How do we cluster them? How do we understand the behavior? How do we understand that one is different from the others? How do we understand that this machine for the last 2 months has never done anything and suddenly it is starting getting SMBV1 and RDP traffic? So by understanding all these things, giving what we call a flow genome, the reason why we chose the medical vocabulary is because for COVID-19, the first thing the breakthrough happened is this, DNA sequence and whatnot. So if you don't have the DNA sequence of every machine, every flow, every transaction, every application, then you cannot solve the problem. You have to have a holistic perspective about everything. This is precision technology. Now, you cannot do this with approximate information. So we just have to immediately tell the firewall that this is what is going on. This has to be stopped. Ordr comes with handy automation and does it. Okay, now that we have done everything that is possible, how do we go to the board and say, your network is safe? I'm sure it's going to operate beautifully. So we go into micro-segmentation. This is peacetime effort. The previous two cases are wartime effort. This is peacetime effort. How do we tell the switch connected to an MRI that only certain transactions, applications, protocols, certain devices can go dial into the MRI? That's where micro-segmentation comes. Now also we're talking about 2,400 access switches in the cameras. How do we tell each switch and what port and where is it connected? Are you doing micro-segment of a particular Windows XP, Windows 7? Are you going to micro-segment of all the physical surveillance cameras? You have your choice. You can go one at a time, one group at a time, one cluster at a time. Understand their behavior, apply policies in a simple way. Ordr is providing all the automation rules and everything. And many large customers are going through this micro-segmentation. This is what NIST supports. This is what everybody wants to do. So finally, I just gave you some examples. How do we do this 360-degree enforcement, closing the loop? This is exactly, you have to know all the pathways, all the devices that is talking to a CT scan or an X-ray, all the pathways, all the gateways, all the wireless, wired, users, applications. You have to have a full perspective of all the layers. They call it shift up and shift left. Right? Shift up means go up to the stack. Shift left means go deeper into the device. you have to create this closed loop, and Order automates all of them in beautiful ways. And along the way, we have workflows built in so that you can make modifications, you can have control. It is an anti-lock break that kicks in when, whenever there's a break light. And finally, I have some recommendations on some 5 categories of medical device protection. Number 1, you have to know what inventory you have, what devices, what patches, what operating system, what password, open ports, vulnerability scan, all of that. And the next one is you have to create clusters, you have to create groups. Medical devices are different, Alexas are different, HVACs are different. Allow what groups need to talk to what groups. VoIP phones have to call manager. They have nothing else going on with respect to other VoIP phones and other laptops with SIP connections only. So things like that. You have to group by model, make, modality, and segment them. And the next one is hygiene on the network. I understand what network is connecting, what is patient area, what's outpatient, inpatient, emergency, rogue AP. And the fourth thing is how do you do segmentation policy for wireless and wired, and finally control the external traffic, who talks to who to external place, because that's where all the ransomware coming. If you control the external traffic, we can control ransomware. If you control the internal traffic, we can control, double pulsar, WannaCry, NetPetya, and that is where we can build it. Finally, to bring it home, it's a pleasure to work with the team at Mayo, and I will hand it over to Eric for some few words on ACCE membership. Thank you.
Thank you both. So I'm just going to give everyone a minute. On the right side of your panel, there is a Q&A module in WebEx. I do have one question we will address momentarily. I just want to bring up that this is a webinar that is hosted by ACCE. If you're interested in ACCE membership, this slide is included in the PDF, or you can go to accenet.org membership. There's a lot of benefits, including access to a lot of different journals and materials, as well as the member roster, a lot of experienced clinical engineers throughout the actual world at this point. There's additional volunteer opportunities, and if you're interested, this is being hosted by the Education Committee, which I'm co-chair of. My name is Eric Ehring, by the way. I don't know if I introduced myself. But the Education Committee puts on an annual series that if you're an ACCE member, actually I don't believe you need to be a member to access that education series. Just reach out to Suli, our ACCE Secretariat. And with that being said, I do have one question from Zachary, and this is directed at Keith. I'm sorry, I do not know exactly what this is referencing, but I have heard this question in reference to these a lot of these tools before, is how many tech hours are required per week for the data capture? And I just want to expand on that a little bit, Keith, for you. Is, what kind of tech hours would you plan for the deployment of a system like this? How would you go about planning that?
Sorry, I was muted. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, technician hours required to deploy the order system specifically for medical equipment, medical devices across the organization. Okay. To be honest, Order within Mayo is actually owned by our networks team. And so our networks team has one full-time, maybe one half-time engineer that's really ultimately responsible for the Order tool, has helped to get Order deployed throughout the organization. On the flip side, within HTM, we've dedicated probably 1.5 FTE worth of resource towards the deployment and the refinement of Order, making sure we're identifying and categorizing equipment appropriately, identifying a list of to-dos or action items or development tasks for Order. So I would say altogether, you're probably looking at about 3 FTEs, and I'm speaking for my networks colleagues, but about 3 FTEs to get it up and running and off the ground. And I think some of that is really dependent on how quickly you move. It's dependent on organizational culture and politics, how broadly you want to be deploying across your organization. Mayo is really focused on medical equipment and some facilities equipment with our first phase rollout. So I think there's a lot of caveats to that answer. But, from my perspective, in our deployment at Mayo, I would say it's been about a 1.5 FTE to get Ordr deployed and supported.
Okay, I have another question for you, Keith, given by Alan, is what percentage of devices evaluated are meeting your cybersecurity device standards?
Good question. So those baselines, I would say it's getting a little bit better, but less than 3% of devices coming in are actually meeting all of the baseline requirements. So therefore, less than 5%, less than 3% of the devices coming in do not require some sort of mitigating control or compensating control on them. That's a gap. That's a challenge that we run into with med device manufacturers, vendors, and that's the conversation of that's the topic of a lot of conversation right now within the whole industry between healthcare delivery organizations, researchers, and med device manufacturers, how to close that gap.
Okay. The next question I have is from Robert over at Children's in California. And that's maybe a question for Pandian, but what kind of accuracy are you expecting for medical device info, manufacturer, serial number, et cetera, out of box for Ordr?
Keith, you want to take it, or you want me to take it?
Well, out of box expectations, I don't know that we had any set goal for out of box expectations for Mayo Clinic. I think the way we went into our partnership with Ordr, and really in my mind, the smart way to go into partnership with any of these tools, any of these automated asset identification security tools, is to know that that this is going to be a long-term partnership and a relationship. We have, as a healthcare organization, have a lot of value to provide to Ordr in terms of things that they have potentially never seen, don't know how to categorize, don't know how to classify, and don't know how to grab detail around. So therefore, we went in eyes wide open. I think that the out-of-box accuracy was good with Ordr, and I think over the last 2 years we've done a whole lot of cleanup, and certainly have more cleanup, on our roadmap, to the point where I think that between what we're capturing from Ordr and data that we already have in our CMMS and other systems that we have on our network, like Cisco ICE, I think that we have a very, very accurate and robust inventory.
Okay. I have a lot of questions and not a lot of time left. I apologize, guys. If we do not get to all of these, we will maybe attempt to do a few answers and post them with the recording or the PowerPoint presentation. I have a couple of questions from Christine. Basically, what is the fleet risk score range? I believe, if I'm understanding this correctly, what's the the device risk range provided by Ordr, and how do you prioritize mitigations for those devices, which is basically Ordr's risk assessment system?
I think I'm going to let Pandian answer this question here.
Yeah, so I think we divide vulnerabilities a bit differently. So for vulnerabilities, identifying HP, Windows 7, FDA recalls, NVD, CDE, all of those vulnerabilities we assign in the current implementation. They pull individual vulnerabilities differently and then look at them. Then there are things like Ripple 20, 11, secret, all of those things. But our scoring of red, orange, yellow, green is actually about what is going on in the network. It's one thing to have vulnerabilities. The other thing is it really getting under attack? Is a WannaCry spreading? Then it becomes red. So we assign scores to every flow, and then if there are enough number of flows that create a lot of problems, in the attack vector, then we assign scores to the devices. So we divide the whole problem into vulnerabilities and active threats that's going on in the network using different technologies. And I think in our implementation, they pull all of them separately so that some vulnerabilities need a little longer time, and the risk score is going to orange level it is immediate to be attacked, immediate to be addressed. Like, for example, some phishing going on, some double pulse arrest thing, then immediately it will do. So it depends on the type of attack, type of thing. We take a very flow-oriented view in terms of it, and then vulnerabilities we keep separate.
Okay. So the next question I have, and maybe this is directed for both Keith and Pandian, but how do you get involved in different organizations, HISAC, FDA, HSCC? That one wasn't listed, I added it. But do your organizations need to pay membership? Are you involved in any committee organizations? Or are there any committees or organizations that you would recommend is what I'm going to add to that question. Sorry.
I guess I can quickly mention a few from my perspective and let you know whether there's a cost associated or not, and then Pandian may have some others that he's interested in. The HSCC work it's all volunteer and it's open to anyone. If interested, you can certainly reach out to me and I can get you some key contacts to get involved. They have a number of different ongoing work groups right now. That's a really good effort. Archimedes is one. It's you don't need to have a membership. They hold a couple of conferences per year, I want to say, but very good representation from the med device manufacturer world, HDOs, third-party service organizations, researchers. Trying to think some other. HISAC, I believe you have to be a member of HISAC to participate in that. I can send some information if you are interested in specific details about that. And the HISALs, you need to be a member organization to participate in those. Certainly the conferences that are offered by HISAC, for instance, they do 2 a year. Are open to anyone, and I think for a fee you can attend those conferences. And again, there's representation from healthcare delivery organizations, clinical engineering, healthcare technology management, IT, information security, security researchers. The government is at pretty much everything I'm mentioning. So the FDA is represented in everything I've mentioned. And just, very, very good opportunity to engage and just be involved in some of the ongoing conversation and resolution that's happening today.
All right. We have enough time. We're going to do 2 more questions, and I believe we're going to have to end. But I know the answer to this question, but Keith, do your regular biomed techs participate in the gathering of the network information for connected devices? Do the people gathering this network information have any special tools or applications to gather the documentation?
Yeah, so we have what we call required fields in our CMMS. So there's a bare minimum amount of information that we need about any asset as it's being added in. So a lot of the network attributes, I think that are the heavy hitters, the MAC address, IP address, host name, etc., are required fields and have to be entered in. Some of the detail that we're grabbing related to equipment really does require additional insight, really drilling into some of the SBOM data that we're getting back from vendors, capitalizing on order to grab detail that we're acquiring from order and feed it into our CMMS, etc. That's really largely handled by our security team. And then to close the gaps, we have what we call a dynamic dashboard for our unit managers and technicians. So if we blatantly know that the MAC address doesn't have enough characters, it's wrong, or order sees a MAC address that's different than than what has been identified in our CMMS. The goal of that dynamic spreadsheet is to go around and clean up issues that we see are really blatant as it relates to data that we have in our CMMS. So that's kind of another avenue that we use to clean up information. And then in terms of specialized tools and whatnot, our security team particularly has lots of specialized tools that they use to really get under the covers of equipment, network testing tools, other more software-based tools that we're able to use to glean out some of the more detailed information that's not really an expectation of our technicians to grab that. Our technicians do have some pretty low-level, network tools that they can use to grab some of these details as well. But it's really a blended effort. our security team and our boots on the ground technicians that have the service keys and the ability to get to the menus and the levels within this equipment where we're able to grab that critical detail we need to have.
Okay. And with that, everyone, we are at 12:05, so I'm going to go ahead and end the presentation. We will make sure that this sounds like there's a lot of interest in having this presentation recorded, being posted. And with that, we'll post the slides as well as many questions as we can answer with as much information as we can provide. So thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.